I was paying the mortgage, buying the groceries, and keeping the lights on. But at dinner, as I scraped burnt potatoes onto my plate, my father looked me dead in the eye and said, "You work so your sister can enjoy life. Don't like it? Leave." So, I did. My keys always stuck in the front door lock. It was a minor annoyance, but after a 10-hour shift managing a high-volume dental clinic, arguing with insurance companies, covering for a sick receptionist, and staring at a computer screen until my eyes burned, that sticking lock felt like a personal insult. I jiggled the key, pushed my shoulder against the chipped white paint of the wood, and finally forced it open. The first thing I noticed wasn't the smell of dinner, but the obstacle course of cardboard. 5 Amazon boxes were stacked haphazardly in the entryway, a pair of pristine, knee-high leather boots spilled out of one, wrapped in tissue paper. I carefully stepped over them, my work shoes heavy on the hardwood floor. From the living room, the muted sound of a reality TV show drifted down the hall, accompanied by the rhythmic tapping of acrylic nails on a phone screen. My younger sister, Harper, was sprawled across the sectional sofa. She was 22, 3 years younger than me, and currently in what my mother affectionately called her discovery phase. This phase had lasted 3 years, and mostly involved discovering new ways to spend money without earning any. "Hey," I said, dropping my bag onto the console table. It landed with a heavy thud, weighed down by my laptop and a stack of billing files I still needed to review. Harper didn't look up. "Hey, don't step on my boots, I have to return them. The calf is too tight." "They're in the middle of the doorway," I pointed out, rubbing the back of my neck. "I'll move them eventually." She took a sip from a plastic iced coffee cup, setting it down on the bare wood of the coffee table. The condensation immediately began pooling into a ring. I wanted to say something about the coaster sitting literally 3 inches from her cup, but I didn't have the energy. Instead, I walked into the kitchen. My mother, Diane, was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled faintly of garlic and heavily of scorched butter. "Nora, finally," my mother said, glancing over her shoulder. She wiped her hands on a dish towel. "You're late. Your father gets cranky when we don't eat at 6. The clinic was packed. Dr. Evans overbooked the afternoon block again. I walked over to the refrigerator, grabbing a pitcher of water. As I poured a glass, my eyes caught the stack of mail sitting on the kitchen island. Right on top was the electric bill. It was already opened. I picked it up, $420. "Mom, why is the electric bill so high?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "It's barely June." Diane waved a wooden spoon dismissively. "Oh, Harper gets hot in her room. She bought one of those portable window AC units. It runs all day." "But we have central air," I said, setting the paper down. "You know the central air doesn't reach her room as well," Diane said, her tone taking on that familiar, defensive edge. "Anyway, just leave the bill on the counter. You usually pay them on Thursdays, right? You usually pay them." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't an assumption, it was an established fact. Over the last 2 years, I had slowly absorbed the financial shockwaves of our household. When my father, Daniel, took a lower-paying job for less stress, I took over the utility bills. When Harper decided college was stifling her creativity and moved back home, I started buying the groceries. 6 months ago, when my parents fell behind on the mortgage, I quietly set up an automatic transfer from my checking account to theirs to cover the gap. I didn't mind helping. I loved my family. But lately, the help had morphed into an expectation, and the expectation had soured into entitlement. "Did you pick up the dry cleaning?" Diane asked, pulling plates from the cabinet. "I didn't have time," I said. "I worked a double." Diane sighed, a sharp, dramatic exhalation through her nose. "Well, I guess your father will just have to wear a wrinkled shirt to his golf outing tomorrow. Grab the silverware, will you? Let's eat." I stood there for a moment, the cold glass of water sweating against my palm. I looked from the $420 utility bill to my mother, who was currently fishing a burnt piece of onion out of a saucepan. I thought about the $1,200 I had transferred for the mortgage 3 days ago, leaving my own savings account hovering near zero. I thought about Harper's $300 boots in the hallway. A quiet, hard knot tightened in my stomach. I set the glass down, pulled open the drawer, and grabbed the forks. Dinner at our house was rarely a loud affair. It was usually punctuated by the scraping of silverware and my father's running commentary on the evening news. Tonight, however, the television was off, and Harper had actually joined us at the table, her phone resting next to her plate, screen facing up. My father sat at the head of the table. Daniel was a man who believed deeply in the hierarchy of the household, regardless of who was actually funding it. He carved the dry pot roast with methodical, heavy strokes, distributing the meat onto our plates. "So," Daniel said, taking a bite of mashed potatoes, "Harper, tell your mother and me about the big plans for next month." Harper perked up, her posture straightening. "Okay, so, Coachella is doing a secondary weekend lineup, and a bunch of the girls from my yoga studio are renting an Airbnb in the valley. It has a pool, a hot tub, and it's literally 10 minutes from the festival grounds." "That sounds wonderful, sweetie," Diane said, beaming. "It'll be good for you to get out of the house. You've been so stressed lately." I chewed a piece of carrots, staring at my plate. Stressed. Harper's day consisted of iced lattes, online shopping, and occasional stretching. My jaw ached from clenching it, but I stayed silent. "The only thing is," Harper continued, her voice adopting a practiced, sweet pitch, "the Airbnb is kind of expensive. Everyone is splitting it, but my share is still around $800. And then there's the festival pass." Daniel wiped his mouth with a napkin. He didn't look at his bank app. He didn't look at Diane. He looked directly across the table. At me. "Nora," he said, his voice flat and authoritative, "your sister is a little short for her trip. You get paid on Friday. I want you to transfer $1,000 into her account." The chewing in my mouth stopped. I swallowed, the food feeling like dry sawdust going down my throat. I looked at my father. He was already cutting another piece of meat, acting as if he had just asked me to pass the salt. "No," I said. The word dropped onto the dining table like a lead weight. Harper's phone lit up with a notification, the screen glaring in the sudden silence. Diane stopped cutting her roast. Daniel lowered his knife, his eyes narrowing as he stared at me. "Excuse me?" Daniel said. I said no, I repeated, keeping my voice steady. I rested my hands on the edge of the table to hide the slight tremor in my fingers. "I'm not paying for Harper to go to a music festival." Harper let out a loud, theatrical scoff. "God, Nora, you don't have to be so stingy. You literally make salary. You have money." "I have money because I work 60 hours a week," I said, turning to look at her. "And that money goes to the mortgage. It goes to the electric bill for the AC unit in your room. It goes to the groceries we are eating right now. I don't have a spare $1,000 for a vacation." "Oh, please," Diane chimed in, her voice shrill. "Don't hold the groceries over our heads. We're a family. Families help each other." "I am helping," I said, the heat rising in my chest. I looked back at my father. "Dad, I pay for 80% of the expenses in this house. My entire paycheck goes to keeping us afloat. If Harper wants to go to a festival, she can get a job." Daniel's face flushed a deep, mottled red. He placed his hands flat on the table, leaning forward slightly. The air in the room felt suddenly very thin. "Let's get one thing straight," Daniel said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "This is my house. You do not dictate what happens under my roof. You do not disrespect your sister, and you do not tally up your contributions like it's some sort of business transaction. It is a transaction when I'm the only one funding it." I shot back, the words tearing out of me before I could stop them. "I'm exhausted, Dad. I'm drowning. And you're asking me to fund a vacation for someone who doesn't even pay for her own toothpaste." Silence slammed back down on the room. Harper looked genuinely appalled, shrinking back into her chair. Diane put her hand to her chest, as if I had physically struck her. Daniel stared at me. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, just a cold, hollow disregard. It was a look reserved for strangers, for people who were of no use to him. "You work," Daniel said slowly, enunciating every syllable, "while your sister enjoys life. That is the dynamic. If you don't like it, leave." I sat frozen. I waited for the punchline. I waited for my mother to gasp, to intervene, to tell him he was going too far. I waited for Harper to say she didn't need the money that badly. Diane picked up her fork and took a bite of her potatoes. Harper looked down at her phone. Nobody said a word. They meant it. I was a utility to them, an appliance, a paycheck in a chair. The anger that had been boiling in my chest instantly evaporated, replaced by a profound, freezing clarity. My pulse slowed down. The ringing in my ears stopped. "Okay," I said quietly. I stood up from the table. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood. I didn't take my plate to the sink. I didn't say excuse me. I walked out of the dining room and headed straight up the stairs. I pulled my duffel bag from the top shelf of my closet. I didn't pack everything. I didn't have time to be sentimental. I grabbed my work uniforms, a week's worth of casual clothes, my toiletries, and the lockbox that held my passport and social security card. As I threw my laptop charger into the side pocket, I looked around the room. I had paid to paint these walls. I had bought the bed frame. But it wasn't my room. Not really. Downstairs, I could hear the muted sounds of the television turning back on. They thought I was throwing a tantrum. They thought I would cool off, sleep in my bed, and wake up tomorrow ready to apologize and write a check. I zipped the duffel bag shut. It was surprisingly light. Walking back down the stairs, the house felt entirely different. It felt like a building I was just passing through. I walked past the living room archway. My father was watching the news. My mother was clearing the plates. Harper was texting. None of them looked up. I grabbed my keys off the console table, walked out the front door, and didn't bother struggling with the sticky lock. I just pulled it shut behind me. The heavy click of the latch echoed in the warm evening air, loud and final. I spent the first night in my Honda Civic, parked under the glaring sodium lights of a 2-4-hour grocery store lot. The driver's seat didn't recline all the way, and the seatbelt buckle dug into my hip, but I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I brushed my teeth in the store's public restroom, bought a large black coffee, and drove straight to the local branch of my bank. I sat across from a loan officer named Brenda. She had framed pictures of golden retrievers on her desk and clicked a ballpoint pen while I explained what I needed. I didn't give her a sob story. I just told her I needed to sever all links between my checking account and my parents' accounts, cancel the automatic monthly transfers, and open a new, separate savings account. Brenda typed on her keyboard, the screen reflecting in her glasses. "Okay, the auto draft for the mortgage is canceled. The utility payments are unlinked. You understand that any bills routed to your routing number will now bounce, correct?" "Yes," I said. I signed 3 pieces of paper, sliding them back across the desk. When I walked out of the bank into the morning sun, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Diane. "Your father couldn't find his blue tie for golf. Where did you put it? Also, we are out of milk." I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. I swiped left and deleted the thread. For the first week, I stayed at a cheap extended stay motel near the highway. The carpet smelled faintly of stale smoke and bleach, and the air conditioning unit rattled like a freight train. But it was mine. I paid the weekly rate in cash. Every evening after my shift at the dental clinic, I would sit on the edge of the stiff mattress with my laptop, eating a $5 takeout salad and looking at my bank balance. Without the hemorrhaging of my family's expenses, my paycheck suddenly looked massive. I wasn't just breaking even, I actually had a surplus. I felt a strange, buoyant vertigo, like taking off a heavy backpack after a 10-mile hike. The messages from my family trickled in slowly at first, mostly carrying a tone of deep annoyance. They fully believed I was throwing a prolonged tantrum at a friend's house. "Harper, day 3. The Wi-Fi isn't working. Did you forget to pay the bill again? Fix it, I have a Zoom class." Diane, day 5. "Nora, this silent treatment is incredibly immature. Your father is very disappointed. Come home tonight, we're having chicken." I ignored all of them. I spent my lunch break scrolling through apartment listings, and by day 10, I signed a lease on a tiny, second-floor studio apartment. It was nothing special. The kitchen cabinets were a peeling beige, and the window looked out over a dumpster, but the door had a heavy deadbolt that worked perfectly on the first try. I bought an air mattress, a cheap set of plates, and a coffee maker. I didn't need anything else. Then, the first of the month arrived. It was a Tuesday. I was at the clinic, organizing patient files, when my phone started ringing. It was Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again, then again. By noon, I had 14 missed calls and a string of voicemails. I took my lunch break in my car and pressed play on the first message. "Nora, pick up the phone." Daniel's voice barked through the speaker. There was no greeting. "The bank just called me. They said the mortgage payment didn't go through. You need to call them and fix whatever glitch happened with your account. Do it immediately. I listened to the next one. Nora, I'm at the bank. The teller is telling me you removed your auto draft authorization. I don't have time for these games. Put the transfer back. Call me. By the fourth voicemail, the authoritative bark had frayed into something sharper, something closer to panic. Nora, the electric company just sent a shut-off notice. What the hell are you doing? You can't just cut us off without warning. Call me back right now. I set the phone on the dashboard. I looked at the screen as Diane's name popped up, the phone vibrating violently against the plastic. I didn't feel a rush of victory or vindication. I just felt an overwhelming, heavy sadness. They weren't worried about where I was sleeping. They hadn't asked if I was safe, or if I had enough to eat, or why I had left. Over 2 weeks of silence, and it only took the bank rejecting a payment for them to actually try to find me. I picked up the phone, opened our family group chat, and typed one sentence. Dad said I worked so Harper could enjoy life, and if I didn't like it, I should leave. I didn't like it, so I left. Do not contact me again. I hit send. Then, I blocked Daniel's number. I blocked Diane's number. I blocked Harper's number. I turned the car off, walked back into the clinic, and finished my shift. 3 weeks later, I was standing behind the reception desk at the clinic, training a new girl named Kelly on the billing software. The waiting room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the overhead fluorescent lights and the instrumental music piping through the ceiling speakers. The glass door chimed, signaling someone walking in from the street. I didn't look up immediately, my eyes focused on the computer screen. Just click the drop-down menu for the insurance provider, I told Kelly, pointing with my pen. Excuse me, a sharp, familiar voice said. My hand froze. I slowly raised my head. Standing on the other side of the high reception counter were Daniel and Diane. They looked terrible. Daniel, usually immaculate, was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt that looked like it had been pulled from the bottom of a laundry basket. The dark circles under his eyes were pronounced, his jaw set in a tight, angry line. Diane looked frail, her usual perfect blowout flat and frizzy. She was clutching her purse with white-knuckled hands. Harper, predictably, was absent. Kelly looked between us, sensing the sudden drop in temperature. Can I help you? She asked tentatively. I'm here to see my daughter, Daniel said, his eyes locked on me. He didn't use his outdoor voice. He kept it low, trying to maintain the illusion of control. Nora, step out here, now. I put my pen down on the desk. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I kept my breathing steady. Kelly, I said calmly, not breaking eye contact with my father. Go to the break room for a minute. I'll handle this. Kelly nodded quickly and scurried down the hallway. I didn't step out from behind the counter. I stayed exactly where I was, using the heavy wooden desk as a barricade. What are you doing here? I asked. What are we doing here? Diane burst out, her voice cracking. We've been looking for you everywhere. We called the police, Nora. They told us they couldn't do anything because you're an adult and you answered a wellness check over email. How could you do this to us? Keep your voice down, Daniel snapped at her. He turned back to me, gripping the edge of the counter. You have completely lost your mind. Do you have any idea what you've done? The mortgage is 30 days past due. They shut off the power to the house on Tuesday. We've been living in the dark, throwing out hundreds of dollars of groceries from the fridge, while you're… what? Hiding? I'm not hiding, I said, my voice remarkably even. I'm working. At the job you told me I had to do so your other daughter could enjoy her life. Daniel's face darkened. I was angry. People say things when they are angry. You don't abandon your family over a dinner argument. It wasn't an argument, I replied. It was an eviction notice. You gave me an ultimatum, Dad. You laid out the terms of my existence in your house. I was the bank. Harper was the priority. You told me to leave if I wouldn't pay her way. I took your advice. Nora, please, Diane pleaded, tears finally spilling over her mascara. We need you. We can't afford the house without you. Your father's salary barely covers the car payments and his debts. Harper had to cancel her trip. She's been crying for days. I stared at my mother, feeling a profound sense of emptiness. Harper had to cancel her vacation, and you've lost power. But neither of you asked where I've been living for the past 5 weeks. Diane blinked, the tears stopping momentarily as confusion washed over her face. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She literally hadn't thought about it. Daniel pounded a fist against the counter, causing a stack of clipboards to rattle. Enough with the pity party. You live under our roof, you contribute. That is how the world works. You owe us. Now, you are going to transfer the mortgage payment, and you are going to come home and fix this mess. He used the same tone he used at the dinner table, the heavy, immovable tone that expected the world to bend to his will. But we weren't at his dining table. I don't live under your roof anymore, I said, leaning forward slightly. I have my own apartment. I pay my own rent. I owe you absolutely nothing. You selfish little brat, Daniel hissed, his face inches from the glass partition. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. And I paid for that roof for the last 2 years. I fired back, my voice finally rising, echoing in the quiet waiting room. I bought the food you ate. I kept the lights on. I carried all of you until my back broke. And the second I couldn't carry Harper's luxury vacations too, you threw me away. Daniel opened his mouth to shout, but I cut him off. This is a place of business, I said, my tone turning ice cold. If you do not leave right now, I will call security and have you trespassed. And if you ever show up here again, I will file a restraining order. Daniel froze. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open, searching my face for the bluff. He was looking for the daughter who always backed down, who always wrote the check, who always internalized the guilt to keep the peace. He didn't find her. He slowly pulled his hands off the counter. He looked around the clinic, suddenly aware of the sterile environment, the cameras in the corners, the fact that he had absolutely no power here. He looked small. Stripped of his armchair and his head of the table authority, he was just a desperate man who couldn't balance his own checkbook. Let's go, Diane, Daniel muttered, his voice hollow. Diane was sobbing openly now. Nora, please. Leave, I said. Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door. They walked out into the bright afternoon sun, the glass door swinging shut behind them with a soft click. I stood behind the counter for a long time, watching them get into Daniel's leased sedan and drive away. My hands were shaking slightly, but my chest felt incredibly light. The tight, painful knot that had lived in my stomach for 2 years was completely gone. Kelly peeked her head around the corner of the hallway. Is everything okay? She asked softly. I took a deep breath, smoothing my hands over my scrubs. I looked at the computer screen, at the schedule of patients waiting to be checked in, at the life that was entirely, completely my own. Yeah, Kelly, I said, offering her a genuine smile. Everything is fine. Let's get back to those billing files. Walking away from family isn't an act of cruelty. Sometimes, it's an act of survival. Nora had to let her family hit rock bottom so she could finally stop drowning. Have you ever had to set a boundary that changed your entire life? Share your experiences in the comments below. If Nora's journey inspired you to stand up for your own worth, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more deeply human stories. Remember, your peace is worth the price.